You're listening to the Scaling Culture Podcast, where we sit down with thought leaders who share their experiences building incredible workplace cultures. Our guest today is Andrew Dart, Navigator and People Leader at VIDA, and just an all-around delightful human and stand-up guy who we all love. Prior to joining VIDA, Andrew spent 10 years leading people in the tourism industry and successfully built high-performing workplace cultures through a few acquisitions. VIDA is one of our companies owned by Scaling Culture host Ron. VIDA is on a mission to revolutionize affordable communities, providing safe, secure, affordable rental suites for residents to call home. So this is a special episode as we'll be diving into our own culture and we'll uncover some of the best people and culture practices we use internally. This episode, we take a look in the mirror at our own culture and share some of our top tips. In this episode of Scaling Culture, Ron and Andrew will discuss culture-driven interview and recruitment process, how to drive autonomy and flexibility in the hybrid workplace, the most effective communication systems at VIDA, and best practices on how to keep your core values alive.
Welcome to another episode of the Scaling Culture Podcast. I'm your host, Ron Levitt, and today, all the way from Halifax, Nova Scotia, our first guest from Halifax, Nova Scotia, I have the pleasure of introducing a friend and colleague, Mr. Andrew Dart. Andrew, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Ron. It's great to be here. You know, I'm an avid listener of the podcast, so it's cool to be on the other side for once. Thanks for having me.
No, look, we're super excited to have you. And for those who don't know, and there'll be a lot that don't, Andrew is a colleague. Andrew's been working for just over a year at VIDA, and Andrew's in the role of Navigator People Leader, which really, if I had to explain that, Andrew leads our frontline team. And so he hires, holds accountable, guides, and navigates them through the organization. And so, Andrew, how big's that team that you lead now?
Give or take a few bodies, probably somewhere around 40 to 45 team members.
40 to 45. I love that. And I want to make sure we come back to that. And you know how ADHD I can be. So we have to come back to that, because I think when people hear that, they're like, how is that possible? How could you lead that group of people? And I want to get back to that because I think that's important. But the intent today was just to have Andrew on and talk about his experience. I know during the podcast, I talk a lot about the things that we do. I learn a lot of things. And so, Andrew, I feel like, and you know this too, sometimes I get off a podcast and we'll jump on a call and say, hey, let's implement now, you know?
We get
to learn so much as an organization. And so I always, some listeners said, I'd be curious to see what's happening in the organization. So I thought no better guest than you, Andrew, to talk about that. So Andrew, just give, you've been introduced. Maddie did a wonderful introduction before we started, but give us a flavor of who you are, just high level snapshot, Andrew Dart.
Yeah. So I'd say high level, I'm a relationships first person. I would say both in my personal life and in my professional life. So to me, family, friends, the absolute top of the list for me. I've always been that way. So I really do enjoy spending time with people, spending time with my family, my wife, Brenna, and my daughter, Penelope, whether it's going on vacations, going to, see events, things like that. And I think in addition to that, if I were to go one step below, I'm a sports guy through and through. And I think you and I have that in common. So, everything from, the major four sports to the most obscure Olympic events, I'm here for it. So I would say, at a high level, that's who I am, a very family and friend oriented person, both in and outside of work, and a sports fanatic.
Couldn't agree more. And a great guy, by the way, really great guy. Andrew is
couldn't really say that myself.
That's right. I'm going to do that for you. Yeah. Andrew's got great energy. He is just, Andrew is the most compassionate, really empathetic, one of the best listeners I've ever met, really understands people, has a high EQ, and so brings a lot of value to our company. And so, Andrew, thank you for that.
I appreciate it.
But I want to go back to the interview, because you were introduced by a friend, Sean Buckland, and you were not in a people leading was a part of what you did, but that wasn't what you did.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I had a title that might make you think I was very involved in leadership, but The reality was I was in a family-run business, and although I was the director of sales and I had a lot of responsibility, it was a very small team. So I think in total 5 people that I would oversee as a director. So quite a small team.
But were you
Um,
also responsible for sales, Andrew? That was part of your role too. It was really sales focused, correct or not?
Absolutely. That
Yeah.
was probably the most important, or I guess consumed the majority of my time, was a sales focused role, with a lot of our, not just account management with our largest customers, but also seeking out new business opportunities as well.
So, when the interview started, and by the way, it started very informally. I always, and we talk about this a lot on the podcast, which is, having people in your virtual bench. And to me, we didn't have an ad running at the time. Andrew was someone I was hoping to add to the virtual bench, which meant, hey, here's our company. Here's what we do. Here's some potential opportunities. Would you be interested if there was an opportunity? And the answer from Andrew was yes. I'd consider this. I'd be open to it. I'll call it, Andrew, I'll say you were satisfied at your job where you
Yeah,
were previously, right?
absolutely. And I really wasn't actively looking, which was sort of made the whole situation unique. I mean, I was more or less really happy with what I was doing. I had worked for, the same company through a few ownership groups for, I guess, in excess to 10 years. So clearly was happy. I enjoyed my time there for sure.
And so yeah, again, the virtual bench doesn't mean someone who's unemployed looking for a job. Just what Andrew said. This is about you meet people send you leads, and you just have that conversation. Here's what we do. If there was something that would be interesting to you, would you be open to a conversation? And so we just fast track that. Let's go back to the interview, Andrew. You and I had a few conversations. Because I want to talk to you about the interview process and break it down in steps, because it was my recollection, and correct me if I'm wrong, was you and I talked. We sent a book for you to read. Then you and I probably talked again. Then you talked to the team, then the building ambassadors, and then we're hired. Correct?
Yes, absolutely. And it was, I would say, the most unique, and that's sort of what caught my attention, most unique interview process I had ever gone through. And you're right, it started casual, you and I having a few phone conversations, just sort of some initial discussions on, what VIDA was all about, sort of learning about the business and about the culture. And that was sort of what kicked it off. I received the book. It was really cool because I felt like I got to know you a little bit before getting into any type of formal interview process. And
Right.
from there, I would say, gosh, there was probably 5 total interviews after that.
Right.
So,
Right.
I kept thinking after this one, there's just going to be one more, and then there'd be another 2. But in
That's right.
hindsight, I think it was really important how it was done.
And so this was all during the pandemic. This was all on Zoom, correct? We didn't even meet in person, I don't think.
Correct.
Right. Because a lot of people, I think have changed their practices. And I was talking about this with someone the other day, and I said, we actually move faster in a shorter period of time because you could on Zoom. It wasn't come to the meeting, and other people have to come to the office, or, and so that made it a lot easier for us. But I want to go back to the book for a sec, because we continue to do that. I believe that the book Outrageous Empowerment, which is it's a short read, it's a fun story. I think I can confidently say that's a filter. And what I mean by that is the intent behind that is, are you actually going to pick it up and read? That's part of the screening process. Do you even care? If you don't, you're probably not interested. But once you do, in most cases, that either attracts or detracts a little bit. It kind of says, wow, that's really interesting. I get overall the theme of what's going on here, the decentralization and empowerment. I'd always wanted this, or I'd like to be a part of it, or it's too weird. I don't want to, that's not for me. Would that be accurate?
Yeah. And to be honest, for me, I was drawn to it. Like, I had never, when talking to a business owner, I'd never gone through that, unique of a story. So to me, like, I read it probably in 2 nights. And I think you're true to your word when you say it's a bit of a filter, because in many conversations following that, you would reference the book, and it would be very obvious had I not read it. And I think it was easy to open up dialogue, not just about the business, but just, regular conversation based on some of those principles, which I thought was really cool, because I thought to myself, thank God I actually read it because,
Right.
because it would be pretty obvious if I didn't right now.
Hugh Gooday, who I'm calling out, had still not read that book.
Yeah.
Hugh, if you're listening, you need to read the book. So yeah. So then you started to interview with the team, because at that point actually we did have an ad out, and there was folks that were competing. We had a few folks competing, and talk about the interview process, and then we'll end with the BA part. But what was your thoughts when you said it was different? What did you like? What did you dislike? How was it different than a typical interview you'd seen?
To me, I think what like my immediate thought to that is it didn't seem stiff and forced. It felt like, and credit to you, you did a great job of sort of setting the tone that this is going to be, an informal, open discussion. And I think what that did was it allowed me to open up and be myself, as opposed to just trying to, a lot of interview processes, it's like somebody reading from a clipboard and you kind of want to have your canned response and go through, what do they want to hear? Whereas I felt like through our interview process, I wasn't trying to think what you wanted to hear. I was genuinely just answering the questions, how I felt, or, how I truly, wanted to be both as a person and as a member of the team. So I felt like that number one was the biggest change. Was it was informal, and I feel like we quickly got to the root of who I was versus just, the clipboard type answers.
And it probably did the other side of things. I'm imagining it got to the root of who other people were. For you to say, I either don't really want to work with these people, or I do. This is who these people really are.
Very, very true. That was a constant theme. And I think it was repeated by numerous team members. It was, we're not just trying to make sure that this is the right fit for VIDA, but we want to make sure it's the right fit for you. And I think that was very clear throughout the process. And I was asked more than once, how I felt about that. How did that aspect of the company or the role make me feel? And I think it was clear from the outset, it was about a two-way street, as opposed to one side just trying to, screen the other.
Absolutely. And then, one of the things, and I believe this is a best practice, and we'll continue to do it, is, we're a flat organization. We always look at things as support versus report, even though there's an accountability piece, of course. But this role was to support our building ambassadors, our frontline part-time team members, right? For the most part. And so I always look at the business and say, it's not fair, and it doesn't make sense that we would hire someone and then introduce, our frontliners to their new boss without them not participating in the process. To me, most people don't do it. They think it maybe is silly or way too unorthodox. I just think it makes total sense. When we started doing that back in the security business, I wouldn't veer from that, because they would ask questions that I wouldn't ask, or the management team wouldn't ask. And so what were your thoughts when you heard you were going to be interviewed by people that essentially you were going to hold accountable for their jobs? Did it throw you off? What did you think?
I was oddly the most nervous for that, because I didn't really know what to expect. It was an unknown for me. I had never been interviewed by frontline staff before, so I really didn't know what I was walking into. But I think it was a lesson learned for me. And I think that, it comes back to what you said. Why wouldn't you have those people interview the potential applicants? Because that's who needs the support, who needs the coaching. So very quickly thinking back, I can remember one of our building ambassadors, Sandra, just having a scenario and talking through it right away, which I felt like having that perspective of, those building ambassadors who live it day in and day out was critical, and not just for screening myself, but it also gave me a pulse on the role. I was able to quickly see, I'm not just hearing from you or whomever. These are the people that are doing that every day. They're the ones who are waking up in the morning and living this frontline role. So it's a lesson learned for me, being able to see, okay, this is exactly what happens. These are the, the attributes that are important. These are the people that are living this life. So I thought kind of two-way street was quite interesting.
That's great. And I remember specifically, and I've told this story multiple times, but all the interviews were recorded so we could watch. If I wasn't part of an interview, I could watch it. I could listen to it like a podcast to pick it apart and think if there was a follow-up question I wanted to ask. And so we always do that. But in that specific interview with 3 building ambassadors, you had Sandra, Kyla, who's the third? Do you remember?
I think Brenda was the third.
Yeah. Okay. Right. So during that, we wanted them to give you specific kind of real life case study. And I remember it was from Sandra, who we had talked about an issue between 2 customers. And the question was, okay, here's the background, here's, the current situation. How would you deal with that? And I remember Sandra posting that question because I had watched the video, and I was the one who dealt with that issue. And I went in, Sandra told me that what was going on. I called the customers directly, blah, 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 and dealt with it. And it was dealt with. I don't even remember if it was good or bad. And so when we presented that, you had said, look, what I would do is I would support you, Sandra, because she was the one dealing with it. I would support you. I'd make sure that, were you comfortable with the conversation? Did you need me to be there? Let's prepare. Let's put a game plan in and go at it. And I was like, oh my goodness, I can't believe it. I talk about this and I stole that person's learning, and Andrew out leadership me on that move. I was just really impressed. And to me, that was the moment I was like, he beat me. He needs to be hired. I just loved it. What are your thoughts as I go back in time on that? I don't know if you remember that conversation.
I do, because I remember being very, very nervous, because I knew it was, in my leadership experience, I knew that was the right approach. Like, I could have easily jumped in, solved the problem, but then that same problem is going to come again. And as we grow, it's going to, times by 10, times by 20. And then all of a sudden I can't continue to solve these problems. So I knew that was, the right approach to coach, train, and lead her through the challenge, so that next time she'd be able to handle it on her own. But I was very nervous to tell that to her, where she was the frontline staff. And I'm telling her, I wouldn't actually solve it for you. I would try to coach you through it. So I remember clearly during that time being like, she might not like this answer, but I think it's the best for VIDA as a company and for her growth as well.
Absolutely. And so one of the things we asked afterwards, because, there was a big debate about the other individual and you, and it was kind of like, there was likability that came up a lot. And not that people didn't like you, but the other individual, like, oh, I really liked her and really liked her. And then the question was, who would you follow? Who can lead you? And then it became clear. It became clear for the group to say, no, Andrew, I think we would follow his lead. Right. And so they picked you as a leader.
I'd like to find out who the people were that said that I wasn't likable, just so I can talk to them.
No, sorry.
I'm kidding.
The other candidate came out. She was so likable. Oh my gosh. She's so lovely. Right. And so it's hard. You just like the person.
For sure.
And sometimes you get caught in an interview with likability, right? You really get caught there. And so, yeah, look, it was, I'm glad. And the other thing I was thinking, Andrew, about the interview is, was it different for you because naturally where your career path was probably going towards a senior sales leader running a sales team? This was very different. There was zero sales. I remember talking to you saying, look, I just think you're an incredible leader of people, and that's an interesting skill. Not many have it, especially for a young, talented person like yourself. What were your thoughts? Did that not land well? Did you have to really think about that? Because it was a bit of a shift of where you were probably thought you were heading.
Yeah, I had to think about it a lot. Not just because of the career path, but the time that I had invested in sales, whether it was, trips that I had gone on for sales training. A lot of my education was involved in sales. But I think what it allowed me to do was be reflective on, not just, okay, what am I focused on right now? What is my path right now, but who I am as an individual. And I think I knew inherently in myself that I've always been good at leadership. Even before my career on sports teams, I was named captain in my friend group a lot of the time. For some reason, I just managed to be the person that people would come to for advice or would sort of guide people. And I think when I started to reflect on, okay, who am I as a person? I think my skills truly did lie in leadership, but I think it definitely was, a big risk all of a sudden just flipping my career on its head and diving into VIDA with a completely different role than I had been doing for the last 10 years.
Different industry, different role.
Yes.
Right. This is real estate. You were in tourism sales, right?
Exactly. So
Yes.
it was completely different. It was like taking a dive off the deep end. I had people in my life being like, whoa, 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 like who are these people? What are you doing? You've had nothing but success in this organization. Why would you jump ship? And, I would really say that I'd give credit to the interview process, getting to know you, getting to know the team, not leaving a stone unturned. Like there was no pulling the wool over my eyes. I really did feel comfortable. And I feel like once I was through the interviews, I knew what I was getting into before my first day. Like it was
Right.
not a surprise, me showing up to the office. I felt good about what I was doing, but it certainly was a big change for sure.
And that let's go into the culture now, because it was, I believe, you came from family business, which is more, traditional and formal. You came to unorthodox, untraditional, progressive, I'll call it. You're in the office of where we started. So you're in one of our side rooms there. I can see we don't have any offices in the office. It's always been unlimited vacation, never have to come to the office. How did that stuff feel when you first started? Confusing, exciting, everything?
Yeah,
What?
it confusing for sure, both confusing and exciting. There was a little, if I'm being totally honest, it was a little bit of like, can this actually be real? Like, is this legit? Like, can I actually have unlimited vacation? But I think as I poked at that, which I know I did in our initial conversations, it was clear to me to understand, okay, but we are results based. So to me, I understood, doesn't mean you're going to take half the year off and not look at your email. It meant if your responsibilities and in the metrics that your role is focused on are achieved, then you can take vacation. And I think once you wrap your head around that, it makes a lot more sense. But I was definitely excited because I felt like in the role I was previously, there were days that, I had completed everything I had to, but, you got to stare at your watch until 5 o'clock before you can consider going down into your car and going home to your family, even though you really have nothing left to do.
Isn't that
So it's just,
interesting?
yeah.
And the other intent is flexibility, right? Because it's, I know you were took your daughter to the Wiggles. I think it was last week, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I actually, I hate to do this live on the air, but I think you went on your own. I don't think you brought little P to the Wiggles. Like,
Yeah, no,
it was a dart move.
I think we'd have a problem if I was going there by myself. Might raise a few eyebrows, but no, it was great.
But back to that, it's really the intent, not just what you said, but it's meant for flexibility. So if you want to go to the Wiggles on a Monday, you just go. If someone needs to do something for you that morning, then just line up and they can do it. But if you need to go work out in the afternoon, go for a bike ride, it's meant so you can do that. And there isn't this pressure of, oh God, I can't because maybe I can knock off a half hour early today. It's no, if you need it, go do it. Just look after your crap,
Exactly. And I know in my experience since being here, that changes everything. Like I personally believe I'm more productive. The product I put in is better. If I need a workout at 11 a.m. one day, I would guarantee my productivity is better by getting that workout in for the remainder of the day, as opposed to, having, all this energy and not being able to get fitness in. And then all of a sudden I might be working more hours, but I'm certainly not as focused or productive.
Let's go to that. Obviously, one of our benefits here, and I don't even remember, do we provide 2 workouts a month?
2 per month. Yes.
2 per month. And then you can buy some more on your own, right?
Exactly.
And so we have a personal trainer, Arnold Smith, who we've been doing business with for quite some time. And Arnold provides 2 workouts per month, either by Zoom or we have a small gym at the office. And then we use a coach, Justine Galvin, on the coaching side. And I think we do 4 sessions a year, and then you can pick up some of your own. What were your thoughts on that? Do you use both services? And was that weird that your company's involved? Are they pushing was it seen as like, this is none of your business, don't get involved in that part of my life? What were your thoughts?
No, not for me. I was wowed by it. Like those were 2 huge value adds to me. And I use every single one of the sessions. And I actually, not just myself with the personal training, my wife actually purchases additional sessions with me. And to me, I just think it's incredible. I think it promotes not only a healthy lifestyle for, your team, but I think, like I said previously, getting that fitness in during a day clears my head. It gets me refocused on what I need to do. And So I know every day that I have one of those workouts, the product and the energy that I bring is going to be better than otherwise.
Yeah,
I love it.
that's great. And the other sessions, the coaching, you utilize that? Works well?
Yeah, every single one.
Yeah, that's great. Justine does a fantastic job with really just, you know, poking at your blind spots and helping you through deep coaching, deep questioning, which, that came up when I wrote the second book. I was like, as much as people would say, "Oh yeah, Ron, you're a coach," I'm really not. I'm not a coach. I'm a mentor, advisor. I can motivate people, but I'm not a deep coach. I don't have that skill of incredible patience and asking questions and questions and questions to drive someone to a different result. I actually don't do a good job of that. So we outsource that. And so you find that's been helpful.
Yeah, and it's been helpful, I think, to myself professionally, but personally.
Right.
And that's something I've been passionate about for a number of years, is how important, both your professional life and your personal life are and how connected they are. And I think she has a very unique skill set of being able to make you, like you said, by asking questions, come to the realizations yourself and sort of guide some decision makings skills both in and outside of professional work. And to me, it's made a huge impact. And I go to every single session. It's guided conversations that I was going to have with you. It's guided conversations I've needed to have with customers, with building ambassadors, with also with my wife outside of work. So I think like holistically, it's been very
Right.
helpful to have somebody that you can spend the time with to get that coaching that you need. I think everyone does. I truly believe
Absolutely.
that.
Absolutely. And because and we talk about this a lot in the podcast. I believe that as corporations or doesn't matter if it's nonprofit, government, wherever you work, as employers, our job is to bring out the best in people. And for that, you should ask for the best in them. You should ask for the results. And so we're constantly, as you know, pushing to do that. What about, what are your thoughts on, because, I hear lots of different groups talk about a 4-hour work day and, every second Friday off or once a month on the summer times you take Friday off. I probably don't like those things because I like flexibility and autonomy. And we use the once a month life day, right? Where it's your life day, do what you want, go to the Wiggles, go hang out with your grandparents, whatever you want. But I like the autonomy of you pick it. Not the business doesn't get to tell you when you get that one day off. And so I'm probably not as vocal about that. But what do you think about the life day and versus us telling you, look, every third Tuesday you have off and plan it for you?
Yeah, I think to me, especially, and I think it's for everyone, but I think for myself with a young family, with a daughter under 2, another child on the way, which I'm not even sure you're aware of, bombshell. But so for me, I think life comes at you so fast, and especially for myself, I'm really focused on family, friendships, travel. I think it has to be flexible for it to have the true meaning. And if it was a set day, then all of a sudden you're trying to work your schedule around it as opposed to it working around your schedule. And then that way you get the true value of having the day off.
Right. Yeah. And for those who are listening, the life day it came from me because during the pandemic, I don't know if you know the story of where this is created, Andrew, but during the pandemic, yeah. I mean, as you know, I've got 3 young kids under the age of 6. And when the pandemic was happening, I was like, I was working, it was the old house that we had, and I had the little basement apartment. And I was like, God, I go to work downstairs and then I come up and then I'm with the kids, which is great, but I'm with the kids. So my transition time is 8 steps, right? And then I'm into the family. And then on the weekends, I'm with the kids, 9 to 9 and when they crash. And so I was just like, I just need a day. I need a day to just clean out the garage. I need a day to do nothing. I need a day to go to the spa. I just need a day. And the weekends weren't working anymore. I wasn't getting a day. And so my weekends, my life changed to, I don't get the weekends to relax anymore. They're actually busier with the children. And so I was like, I'm just going to implement this life day because I need it. And if I need it, everyone should probably might need it too. And so that's where it came from.
Yeah. And it, like when I tell it to people, they don't believe that it's real. They're like, they say that, but don't take it. But no, like there's actually a pressure from, everyone in the team to take it. Like, it's not
Right.
just there if you need it. It's like, hey, you didn't take your life day in October. Like, make sure you take it. And I think that's really cool because it shows the team that you're prioritizing their well-being. Because let's face it, you need a day, like you said.
Yeah.
Everyone does. So it's cool.
Yeah. What else, Andy? What else do you find unique that you have been seeing now over the last year that might be different from what you've seen? And what are the impacts of some of those things?
Gosh, I think we covered a few things that are very unique. I think the flexibility for sure. One thing that I tell people about all the time, and kind of comes back to being a sports fan, is the daily huddle. I think that is invaluable to our business, especially when you have, folks who might be at home, in the office, traveling, what have you. The huddle to me is just a quick check-in across the entire team. That I think is very unique, and at a unique time slot of 11:52, which some people might think, why would you pick that? But it actually makes it possible to have an 11:30 call and a 12 p.m. call. So to me, I don't know if the listeners would know what the huddle is, but I would say that's very unique.
Yeah, I'd say our two most impactful and important communication rhythms and meetings are the daily huddle. And that reminds me, I want to talk about Friday's huddle for a sec. And then the other one is quarterly planning. Like, we do quarterly planning. We don't miss a beat. We've never missed a beat, 2 days. And Andrew, I know those were new meetings for you. What are your thoughts on the quarterly planning? And then I want to come back to Friday huddle.
Yeah, no, and that was honestly one of my biggest reasons for joining VIDA, if I'm being, completely honest. One, I would say I was impressed by you as an individual. So I really wanted to put my chips in on that and jump on. And then secondly, it was the idea that we question the status quo. I felt like, regardless of where I was going in my previous career, great title, corner office, you would argue I had everything I wanted for somebody who was under 30. But what I really wanted was to be empowered to make decisions that impacted the business. I felt like I had things to give, and I wanted to, be involved in strategic decisions working on the business. And that was something that gives me energy, something that I wanted to experience and be empowered by. And I thought, wow, how crazy and cool is this, that the business will stop. Of course, mission critical items will continue, but legitimately everyone will go to these strategic quarterly planning sessions, and we'll rip the business apart, and everyone's involved. And I just thought that was so different than a lot of experiences I had, which was a very small select group of people would make the decisions, and then the staff would be responsible to implement them, even if it wasn't, something they had input on the strategy moving forward. So to me, that is just, I love that. That gets me fired up to go and rip the business apart and have a say and make an impact on where we're going.
Thanks, Andrew. And I agree. And look, that's what makes it exciting. The business is a different business every 6 months. And the one thing we always do is we always have a front line. Lately, for the last few quarters, have been Sandra from our office joining us, because we don't want to plan for someone who's not in the room. It's not right to not have their feedback, to not have them to have a voice at the table. And so that's great. Go back to the Friday huddle. What are your thoughts on Friday? I know Martin, our COO, talked about it in an interview with Jared, who's our controller, as one of his highlights. What are your thoughts on Friday huddle?
Yeah. So for those who don't know, the Friday huddle, what we do is we make a point for each person to share their highs of the week, whether it be, milestones that VIDA hit, or personal achievements, just something that was your high of the week. But then we also have shout outs. So we'll shout out coworkers for different things that they've done. So to me, it's cool. Everyone leaves that meeting happy. It ends the week on a high, and it recognizes people's hard work. I think I would be surprised if anybody on our team said they don't like Friday huddle. It really
Yeah.
is a really cool experience. And I think I've been in meetings previously where, you share your highs and your lows, and although some productivity can come from the lows, it's cool to have this meeting. It just brings positive energy. Let's just talk about success. Let's keep ourselves motivated and working towards the common goal.
It does kind of balance off the shit that you went through for the week. It kind of says, wow, okay, well, there was so much good stuff. And it's nice to end the week with a, wow, that's great, versus a, oh, thank God the week's over. Right.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I think it can be like the feeling of getting a shout out yourself is really cool. Like, wow, somebody actually noticed that I did this week. So I think that is also really motivating. But I think collectively, just to see what the business has accomplished week in, week out is definitely energizing.
So let's go back to where we almost started. We had the fact that you lead 40 to, I think I was giving a presentation in Miami the other day on our business, and I think I counted 47. It might have been building ambassador, something like that. It might have been 43. I can't remember now. So you're pretty darn close. Very flat organization, not a lot of hierarchy here. Everything is more of the supportive. Yes, we have checks and balances, accountability. And as you know, when you have a very strict org chart, things are black and white. They're black and white. You know what works, or sorry, what you can or can't do, how to get approval, what you can or can't do. It's harder to get things approved. It can be slow as molasses. Bottlenecks and bureaucracy kind of happen. And then you have what we do, which is flat, nimble, chaotic, right? Sometimes it's very chaotic. And there's a lot of energy that goes into designing the org chart and redesigning because of growth. And then how do we redesign it now? What are your thoughts? You came from that. Now you're in this. What are your thoughts on this kind of redesigning of org charts and flat structure? If you had to speak objectively about both.
Yeah, I think when you're in the strict org chart, you're always asking up. At least that was my experience. Like you're sort of not making a decision. You need somebody else's approval to make the decision. And whether that goes up to one person and then they have to go up to another person, it can really slow things down, especially when you're working in a business like ours where, we're growing and learning and we're focused on innovation. So I feel like when you're trying to pilot a new initiative, if you had to get approval, then all of a sudden, you might be waiting 3 weeks before you get the go ahead to even start down that path. When in our system, it might be chaotic. We might not have all the answers right up front, but in 3 weeks, you might have already learned 5 things that you wouldn't know otherwise.
Right.
So I think for me personally, it's cool because you actually get to try, you get to innovate, you can think iteratively and see if you can, make an impact on your ideas. You have the autonomy to move, but I think that extends to our frontline staff. They are more invested and motivated in their role because they feel like they have an impact. What their thoughts, their experiences are, they don't necessarily have to go through hoops and multiple people to see if they can try something at their building. It doesn't mean that we just say, go, run, do whatever you want. There's expectations, there's, key performance indicators, there's communication rhythms. And I think one thing that you talk about a lot, the decision-making process as well, which can also guide them in a decision they face without having to, work up the chain to get that answer. So it's very different than anything I have ever done before. And I think for some people it's energizing, and that's how I feel. For somebody who doesn't want to have that autonomy, it might be a different world. It might not fit. So I think as much as, we see the value in it, for certain people, it might not work.
No, that's right. And I always say, look, there's no right or wrong. This is like olives. People either really like that or they don't. And we've found when we haven't really communicated enough in the screening process, if someone's joined the organization and they've left because of that. They said, this is way too unorthodox. I'd rather be in the box. I might have socialized the idea and thought it was neat, but once I've gotten here, it's no good. And it's I'm going to use the word divisive. It allows people to say, wow, I'd really like to be a part of that, or that is just out to lunch. I don't want to be there. No right or wrong.
Yeah. Great.
What else, Andrew? What else? What else is something unique that you've seen that would be different? And that's one question. Then I have a second question for you. Anything else that stands out that is interesting that maybe you talk about when you're out for a coffee or a sports game with your friends and they say, what's going on over there?
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff. You know, I think one thing we chatted about the other day, you know, my wife getting a letter in the mail thanking her, and giving her some cash, which I thought was something that was very unorthodox and unique and really shocked me. But I think the message was, you know, we want you to know that we understand the role that you play in supporting your husband to be involved in this business. And I thought that was very unique. I would say.
And how did that land, Andrew? I know we talked about it because so just to break that down, we want to be an organization that celebrates people's milestones, 1 year, a 3 year, a 5 year. And typically we haven't done that. And that's a look in the mirror moment for me where I just, those dates just, I don't even know how old I am half the time. And so, and being dyslexic and stuff, I just, those dates just don't impact me. And I don't even know how old the company is a lot of times. So those things aren't on my radar, but doesn't mean that's right. It doesn't mean that that's not important to someone else. And we said, look, that's an opportunity to really button that up. And so one of the things we decided to do was to thank families. And so I wrote a letter to Andrew's wife and his daughter, even she'll be able to read it someday. And just about, really what Andrew said is what thanking them as a supportive family and us thanking them for allowing Andrew to work here and knowing that can be tough sometimes because we're trying to do some big things and a small gift of appreciation. How did it land at home?
Yeah, it was, remarkable, to be honest. Like my wife, she was so shocked by it. Like she was almost just like, why am I getting this? But I think as she started to digest it, she understood the message, which was what you said, giving me the opportunity. There's going to be times where, we're working on a really important integration. I might have to spend a few extra hours focused on the work to get it done. So I think thanking her, it really landed because it was something she had never experienced before. She was really excited to go to Amazon right away and spend the money. I think was huge. So I think both the letter and, not gonna lie, the money had a nice little impact. But yeah, she shared it with my parents, with her parents. So I think it was something that she was shocked but impressed by.
Well, look, I'm glad to hear that. My second question is, it's been a year and change now, right?
Yep.
What have you learned about yourself through working here that you didn't know before?
It's a good question. I think that I learned that if things are looked at differently, different outcomes can be achieved. And by that, I mean, had you hired me and said, hey, there's going to be a team of 47 building ambassadors, and you're going to be responsible for their accountability, for coaching, for everything, I would think you're crazy. There's no way I can do it. So I do think learning that there's different ways to approach situations, I think was something that I learned, where maybe before I didn't think that would have been possible. I think I might have known already about, my leadership skills, but I don't think I had ever really put them to practice at this scale. So I think I learned that, the hunch that I had that I could be, a supportive leader and coach is something that I think I've proven since I've been here. So that was, something that I always thought I could do, but now I've actually proved it to myself that I can do it, which was pretty empowering. Yeah, I would say those would be the two key takeaways.
And let's go back. You touched on it again there about kind of leading a 45-person team. And I think some people do scratch their heads because, there's been management books for years that have said, I don't know, I think it's 7 people is the optimal number. And if you have one-on-one coaching meetings once a week with those 7 people, we don't have that. We view coaching as we're here when you need us. And if we're coaching you proactively, if that's what you haven't asked for, it's not a great sign in this organization, We believe that if you build a system, process, and support, then you can lead, navigate, guide lots of people, because you're just navigating and guiding. You're not telling people what to do. Would that be accurate here? What are your thoughts as I'm saying that? Because of course, when you came in, you thought, look, there's no way if you told me I have to lead 45 people, I couldn't do it.
Yeah. No, well, I think that's just it. And it comes down to process. It comes down to systems. And I think that is the key. We use technology. There's, learning systems. They can use VIDA University to get the skills they need. But then I think one of the biggest things is having a network amongst themselves, which I think I, of course, can assist in by identifying folks that might be an expert at a specific skill or, really good during these situations. But there's also just that organically builds based on our culture. So we have, a few different places, one being workplace, where it's like a Facebook that they can tap into for the organization, share ideas, best practices, update each other on milestones. It's a very interactive, I guess, internal social media, which, there's posts every single day, multiple posts. But then I think having those experts and knowing who they can go to, it helps them be able to, guide each other, I think, which is very, very powerful, as opposed to always having to go to one specific person for guidance. When you have people who can do it 10 times better than me, you might have the majority of the BAs could solve a problem better than myself. So why not have them tap into each other's potential? I think that is a key element. And I really do think it comes down to process and systems. Like there is clear process for different aspects of their role, and they get the coaching the training when they go through VIDA University. But then they also have live time supports, whether it be technology that assists them and guides them, or direct access to our office team, not just their colleagues on the front lines, which I think is quite different. They don't have to have a middle person where they go to then relay an answer from a different person. They have direct access to each department. So if there's a building ambassador who has a question for you, Ron, they pick up the phone and they call you, and that saves so much time. And I think that is, in thinking out loud, that's probably the most important part of the model, I would say.
I was thinking, Andrew, when you were talking about that, because people, I think, that hear about these types of organizations think that they're too chaotic. They're chaotic because we grow and there's no playbook. And so there is no playbook. And we always go back between what do we centralize and what do we decentralize? And typically in a perfect world, we centralize support systems, resources, and then we decentralize the decision-making. That's really what we want to be as we scale. Yep. But you have to build systems for that. But I think from the outside looking in, people say it's just chaos and they probably don't have systems. Where I think that, formal organizations in a lot of cases might lack systems because they have individual knowledge and the person has the knowledge. Am I wrong from your experience, from where you came from in the past? Were they buttoned up with technology and systems, or where would you score us against other organizations from a systems process perspective?
Quite high. It's not just that, quote unquote, tribal knowledge or something where you have an individual who has, all the answers. A lot of the time that means you don't need a process because you just go to Bob for that answer. Whereas I think, would score very high. I mean, I would give us a 9 or a 10 out of 10 for systemizing, because we don't rely on somebody's internal knowledge to solve a problem. We always talk about, what is the process? We have it mapped out on our task mapping. And I think that is truly what separates us and makes it possible to live amongst the chaos. It is by having these right established processes.
And one thing that I talk about a lot, and I'd love the listeners to hear in real time. So I always say, look, if you really are a culture-driven business, which as I think you do, believe that's the way to build a successful organization, that you screen for your values you onboard with your values, you coach, and then celebrate your values. High level, that's how it works. But the last piece is you update your values. You look at your company culture and your values like you do a system or process and say, wow, this needs to be updated. It's down 2.0, it needs to be 3.0, 4.0 because of what we've learned. Have you been in an organization that lived their values, and what are your thoughts on us? And maybe you can describe how we've updated them even in the year that you've been here, and not down to the specifics, but just generally what your thoughts on that are.
Yeah, well, I think even as recently as our last quarterly strategy meeting, we reviewed our values. We go through them at every single quarterly meeting, not just for the new hires who we want to make sure that they understand, but for everyone to say, has anything popped up in this last quarter that, has us questioning what our values are, whether it be modifying, adding, to the values. But I think the values, it starts, you talked about the values in our initial phone call, like before we even got to an interview, we talked about the values. So I think from an alignment and a culture standpoint, it's critical. Like we need, everyone to be, I guess, rowing in the same direction. And I think that leads to success, innovation, and productivity. But I think a lot of the time values end up being, they're on a piece of paper slapped on the wall, or, they're on the website, but you walk in around many businesses and ask them, hey, what are your values? Do you know them? Most people would say no. At least that was my experience with us. It's like, you get questioned your first quarterly. Hey, what are our values? And I remember having to answer that my very first quarterly. And I think it shows, or it sets the precedent that these aren't just written. It's not just fluff. These aren't just for the outside looking in. Like, this is how we live and breathe at the organization. It's fundamentally different.
Absolutely. And I think there's nothing worse really for those leaders out here that might have this experience where they're talking about, they're proud of their values, but then they know that someone like an Andrew will come in the organization and be like, that was a crock of BS because no one's living this. They don't even know, like, no one knows about this. That happens a lot, the continuity of these things. I always go back to a story about Martin, who's our COO, who called me out on a huddle on a decision we were making. And he read our values in front of the entire group. And I was like, oh my goodness, this has finally come true.
Yeah.
Because was a great sign for me of being called out and have the organization called out based on our own values. It was phenomenal.
And I've had similar instances when I've used them when I'm having a tough conversation. And I think when you're up to date in your values, in your, relentlessly reviewing them and ensuring that they're up to date and reflective of where you are and where you want to be as a business, they can guide tough conversations. And I know personally, I've had a number of times where, maybe the tough conversation is getting to a point where there's high emotions or people are upset. And instead of it becoming, a personal disagreement, I can just tie it back to the values. Like, here are our values and here's where there's a misalignment. And I find it's much easier to have those tough conversations when it's not just a feeling or an emotion. It's, hey, this is like, these are our values. This is what we do. And then it's also easier for others to then perceive maybe where they went wrong. It's like, oh yes, like,
right. It's not
personal. I wasn't living our values.
Right.
So it's guided me, I know, in quite a few conversations.
Good. Well, Andrew, anything else, that comes to mind that as we come to the end, anything else we haven't talked about that you think is worthwhile for someone to hear? And first, look, as you think about it, thanks for your time. I love, obviously, it's great to spend time with you, and I love hearing your perspective on it. Anything else we haven't talked about? Otherwise, I have maybe one last question for you. What else? What else have we not talked about that maybe you thought about, or something you're thinking about? What's a problem you're trying to solve right now? What's keeping me up at night?
Problem I'm trying to solve right now. Nothing really jumps out. I wish I had something top of mind right now, but I don't think I do.
Well, let me ask you this. If you could wave a magic wand and change one thing about our culture, if you could improve one thing, what would it be?
improve one thing. See, I think this is where it's tough because you've asked us this so many times that we've given our thoughts on. So it's hard to think, okay, where can we change this? Because really it's something that we're adding to all the time. And I hate to dodge your question that way, but
you dodge.
Maybe it can make me talk about, I think, not that I think there's something to be improved upon, but to my point where I truly think it's something we're constantly looking at. And I think it's similar to the values, is that we're constantly trying to improve our culture. And, we do so many unique things, whether it be, our welcome lunches. I think they're fundamentally different. The person's first day with the team, they get to pick the food they want. They get a cool gift. We're playing games, getting to know each other. So, we do all kinds of great stuff, but I just think that's what's fundamentally different about our culture is we truly want to be the best, I think, in the world for company culture. And I think we'll continue to strive to be that. Going through without getting too personal here, I recently had a really tough point in my life where, I was going through the loss of my father, which to me was something that, I'd never gone through an experience like that. Like, he was my go-to person, talked to him every single day, talked to him about, decisions I was making in my life, asking for guidance. He was a sounding board. So I was going through a hard time, like no sugarcoating it. And then to see the support from the team, like, this might not be something that's written in our culture, but food delivery coming to my house. I wasn't worried about meals for a long time after going through it. There was food delivery. There was, things showing up at my house every day. There was, the understanding that I could take the time I needed and the team would cover regardless of what we were going through as an organization. So to be honest, I'm not trying to BS it, but I really do think the culture is second to none. And I can't think of a magic wand play that would improve it unless, we get LeBron James speaking to the team. That's the only thing I can think of.
All right. We'll make it happen. Well, hey, you got Russ Courtnall for the
true.
welcome.
True. That was cool for sure.
Russ Courtnall, the old hockey player, is a good friend of mine, and I knew Andrew was a sports fan, so I had him send a video welcoming Andrew to the team. That must have kind of threw you off guard, did it?
Yeah, it was impressive, to be honest. Pretty cool.
That's good.
And,
well, Andrew,
and I think Majumder too was pretty cool to see too.
Yeah. Sean's been great. Yeah, he's popped in on some huddles and some different things. Well, Andrew, look, and thanks for sharing that. I really appreciate you being vulnerable there. Thanks for joining me on the show, and thanks for the work you do. And let's keep kicking butt, and let's keep building a world-class culture.
Awesome. Appreciate it, Ron. Thanks for having me.
For more information about Andrew, please follow him on LinkedIn. To learn more about our books or the Scaling Culture Masterclass, please go to scalingculture.org. And if you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a comment and share the podcast with one of your friends or colleagues. We'll be back soon with another incredible guest.